Hello and welcome to my bass world. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I started to play bass, and I'm going to do a little bit of demonstrating about how my whole bass rig works. I've had a lot of people ask me about that, so I thought you guys might like to see a demonstration of how it all works together. And I thought maybe I could do a little demonstration of some of the songs that are on the new CD. So you could see some of the bass parts and how I came up with them, all of that kind of thing. But first I was going to talk about why and how I first started to play the bass. As I was growing up, I was in a really musical family, so I had the benefit of learning how to sing, learning how to play the piano at an early age. Both of my parents were musicians and singers, and my sister also is an incredible singer. So it all kind of rubbed off on me a little bit. But as far as playing the bass goes, it never really occurred to me to play an instrument for real. My sister always pointed out bass lines in songs, so I was always cued into that, and I always heard the bass line. And whenever she said, "This is a really cool bass line," I thought, yeah, that's a really cool bass line, because she's my older sister, and everything she says is cool. So that really got me listening to bass lines. And of course, that was in the 80s when there was a ton of really cool bass stuff out there. Duran Duran, Kaja Gugu, all these bands, Nick Kershaw. I mean, I could go on and on. They had these incredible bass lines. So I just grew up thinking that that's the way bass was supposed to sound. Really busy, really melodic, and really cool. So sometimes I would play around with my mom's old acoustic guitar, and I would kind of pick out the level 42 bass lines or something, and screw around with it that way. But it never really occurred to me that I could actually play the bass. I don't know why, I just assumed it was something other people did. So I went off to college, and I was a very serious student. I was a French and Russian major, and so since I had two majors to do in 4 years, I had to work really hard, and I also had a job on top of that. So being a musician never even occurred to me. I was a very serious student, and I was going to have a real job and be a real person eventually. But one day at work, I worked in an espresso place, which started my long love of coffee and espresso drinks, unfortunately. And the guys that worked in the sub shop downstairs said they needed a backup singer, and they'd heard that I'd done some singing in high school. Well, I said, "No, I'm not the person for you. I don't sing like that. I sing in a pretty choir voice. I don't know how to sing pop music or rock music." And they persisted, and they finally talked me into it. So I tried it, and it was fun. And I did a little bit of singing on a recording that we did, and I think maybe in a show or two. And they didn't actually have a bass player. It was a couple guys playing guitar and a drummer, and they decided they wanted to add bass. Well, they looked and looked and couldn't find anybody. And there happened to be a bass sitting around at practice one day. And so I picked it up, and I felt like I'd played it all my life. It just felt completely natural in my hands, and I was able to pick out the bass lines and that kind of thing that they wanted me to play, which was probably owing to my musical background. I developed a really good ear. I wasn't so strong at reading music, but I could pick up music by ear really, really quickly. So it helped me to develop my bass skills really fast. So that was 20 years ago when I was in college. I think I was 19 at the time when I first picked up a bass. So I started a little bit later than some people do. A lot of people start, when they're younger, but I don't really think it matters when you start. As long as it's something you enjoy doing, you're going to keep playing it and doing it and develop as you go. But I never really thought that I would continue on doing it. I was a serious student. I was going to go on and have a real life and everything. So I think that band kind of fell by the wayside, and whatever happened, and things moved on. But in the meantime, I had to have a bass to play. So I had just been borrowing the bass that was there. So a guy that I had known was selling his Rickenbacker for $150. And I didn't know anything about gear. I really still don't know a whole lot about gear. But I thought, well, $150 is something, I could afford. So I went ahead and bought it. And that's this bass you see right here. It's this beautiful Rickenbacker 4001 bass with this crazy mirrored chrome pick guard, and of course it's it had a beautiful tone, a beautiful sound to it, and I fell in love with it immediately. And that was probably another reason why I wanted to play, because it sounded so great, and it felt really good too. It feels great to play. Rickenbackers do, I think. So not long after that, then I needed amplification. So I got this old PV combo bass amp that goodness knows how old it is, or how many people it went through, or what it had been through in its time. But I actually still have that to this day too. It's sitting right behind me, and it's had some good use too over the years. So I ended up buying this equipment, played a little bit, but didn't really take it too seriously. Then down the road, I met Joe, who was also at college at the same time, and we were in a band together called Run Toto Run. And of course, I joined the band as soon as I found out Joe was in it because, we met at a party and it was love at first sight. So I would do anything. If he was going to be in the band, I was going to be in it too. So we played together and had a blast and developed this great rhythm section rapport. But of course, that band eventually fell apart as well. And, I was still trying to be a serious student and go about my studies, and eventually graduated and went to graduate school for Slavic studies, and, still going to be going on about a real life. And so Joe and I got married, and he was going to be the musician of the family. So I kind of let the whole bass thing go by the wayside, and I didn't really play that much. We moved to Seattle, and Joe was going to be the drummer, and I was going to be the breadwinner, and that was how it was going to be. Well, of course, that didn't work out at all, and Joe convinced me to try out for some bands in Seattle, and I ended up playing with a band called Citizen Cry. And it was at that point I needed to update my amplification. The poor little PV combo just wasn't cutting it. So it was at that point that I found the SWR SM900 and the 8x8 cabinet. And I took my Rickenbacker to the music store and I set it up side by side with that and the Ampeg stuff, because everybody said Ampeg was the way to go and that's what I should buy. But I thought, well, I'll try some different things. And I tried the SWR rig, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I love the sound of the Rick, but coming through the SWR was just took it to a new level completely. It sounded amazing. So I got the SWR SM900 and the 8x8 rig, and that was 13 years ago, and it's still hanging in there and working for me today. So again, I keep lucking into these great equipment purchases that really inspired me to keep playing because it just sounded great. I think that's the thing, when you get equipment that doesn't sound so good, you don't really feel all that excited about playing. But I kept getting these incredible pieces of equipment that just made me want to play more and hear the sound more. But even still, I was still going to be the real job person, and Joe was going to go on and be the musician. Until finally, I was in a band called Clatter, and our drummer decided that she wasn't going to play with us anymore, and Joe, his band was kind of disbanding, and so he came and started to play with us. And it just sort of snowballed from there. I never really had any luck getting a real person job, so I didn't really have any reason not to be a musician. I wasn't exactly earning any money, so I wasn't making a step down at all. So we started playing in this band Clatter together, and it was at that point that I really started to develop my playing style and get a little bit busier and practice more often and start taking it a little bit more seriously. So we recorded an EP with those guys and did a little bit of touring and everything, and that was great. And then we moved here to Missouri, and that band kind of fell apart, and we dropped the bean and became Clatter and played with the guitar player for a while. But because I still continued to play kind of busily and everything, I kept up that aspect of my playing, and it was just something I'd grown up with. I was so used to hearing busy bass lines that that's what I wanted to play. That's what I thought sounded really cool in music. So when the guitar player had to move on and do other things, it just seemed like a natural progression for us to just go on as a two-piece. And so it wasn't really anything that we did on purpose, because our guitar player had left. We were just sort of left with the two of us. And because we live out in the middle of nowhere, it's kind of hard to find people to play with, when you live miles from the nearest town. So that's when we started to develop our little two-piece band idea. And from there, I just kind of kept adding more and more equipment and kept coming up with more and more sounds and different ideas, that kind of thing. But the weird thing looking back is that I just never thought I would be doing this when I was a teenager, when I was in college, when I first started to play. It all just sort of came naturally, came out of nowhere. It didn't have any sort of plan or any, it didn't really have any specific goals in mind or ideas. It just kind of unfolded and developed as it went, which is also the same with my playing style. I've never really sat down and tried to learn a specific style. In fact, I don't really actually play other people's music. I've learned a few parts here and there, but normally I'll just sit and see kind of what comes out, and then we just go from that. And I think in a way that helps me develop my own style and creates this kind of a unique playing style that I have. So that's sort of the story behind me playing my bass and how I ended up playing bass and how my whole equipment and bass style progressed.